Yeah, first and foremost, let me just thank everybody for being here and certainly all your support here in the last 2 months. It's been a whirlwind in a lot of different ways, but really appreciate all you do in the coverage of obviously Penn State football. One little nugget I want to say, obviously, happy National Women and Girls in Sports Day. A girl's dad who's a father of two student athletes, a senior track athlete and a sophomore basketball and track athlete, and obviously have 8 wonderful and amazing women that are leading in our football program and on our current staff. We're really grateful for each and every one of them. The last 2 months, like I said, has been a whirlwind in a multitude of different ways. It's the last time I probably have seen everybody in one place at one time. It's been a lot, and it's been a joy to watch this thing come together. I would say the beginning part of it was trying to figure out, unify, and align a football team, and we put a lot of time and effort into both our Penn State roster, and then, as a lot of you have covered us know, there's been about 55 additions to build a football team for this current football season. And I feel like we went with a mentality of not wavering from who we want this football team to be, what the value systems of character, young men that love the sport of football, young men that love Penn State. And I would say, most importantly, young men also to know the understanding the value of an education from this institution. Those core values were really critical for us to kind of build this football team forward. I think the second piece of it has been putting a coaching staff together, and I know you'll get a chance to meet a lot of those guys this afternoon, and I look forward for you guys to get to spend some time with them. But really, with the very similar value system, men that understand the value of the growth and development that it takes to develop a football team, first and foremost. Certainly guys that have a great passion for teaching 18 to 22-year-olds. And then I'd say the last piece of it is understanding that this is bigger. This is bigger. This is a transformational journey. Taking a young man from young man to man is still critical in college football, and making sure that we had a coaching staff that's aligned and unified to those values and to those goals. And so, those are really what we've been doing here over the last 2 months. And we're really excited to be finally off the road here the last couple of days to be back with this football team. Our team has been training. We're about 3.5 weeks into the training journey for this football team. Obviously, the next big step is winter conditioning here in the next couple of weeks, and then the opportunity to get into spring football. And so I know we'll get to see you guys a lot at that point as well. So with that said, I'll open it up to questions that you guys would have for me.
Please raise your hand. We'll take a mic to you, and if you could introduce yourself for Coach as well. We'll start with Rich over here on the right.
Hi, Matt. Rich Scarcella from the Reading Eagle. Matt, you mentioned the whirlwind. I was just wondering what these 2 months have been like for you, your staff, but also how do they compare to when you took over Toledo and Iowa State? What has been unique about these last 2 months?
Yeah, I think the uniqueness, I'll start there, has been just the landscape that we're in is so completely different. And that's not a positive or a negative, it's just different. Obviously, when you took over the last 2 programs, you didn't have a transfer portal. The Toledo job, you kind of came in a situation where you were currently on staff. I would also say you didn't know what the heck you were doing. You're 31 years old, and a lot of people, you guys may say, I don't know what the heck I'm doing later on at some point anyways. But the reality of that is, that was its own experience. I think the Iowa State experience certainly helped. It was very similar. You kind of came in, and again, I think sometimes you can have a sense of ego and entitlement sometimes in coaching. You guys probably know that, where you think you have all the answers, and the reality is you don't have all the answers. And I think what Iowa State taught me is you have to go in and you have to figure out what was going on. What are the positives? What are the areas of growth? And how do you make the right moves moving forward? And I think that's what I took, that I learned from my Iowa State experience into this experience, that you don't have all the answers. You certainly know who you are and what your vision to build a program is, but how do you know what are the right moves until you know where they're at, where we're at, and where we need to move ourselves forward to? And so, I think that's probably the carryover similarities. taking over here. But I think the difference, obviously, was probably the player acquisition piece. How do you build a current team to move forward? How do you build a foundation? And again, there's probably some areas that you wish you didn't have to deal with, and then there's probably some other areas you're really grateful that you had the ability to deal the way we were able to deal with to build the best team we possibly could to move ourselves forward. And this team's got to be a great foundation for the vision forward of Penn State football.
Rear on the right, Mark.
Mark Brennan, Lines 247. Thanks for your time, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about the whirlwind of the last 2 months, I guess it was. What are the next few weeks going to be like? You touched on that a little bit, but can you go into a little bit more detail on how difficult is it to shift gears from, acquisition, building a staff, to the nuts and bolts of getting this team ready?
Well, I think it's just the world we live in. Whether we just got here or not, it's a whirlwind no matter how it slices, just with the transfer portal, high school recruiting in January, and to be honest with you, coming back. And I think no matter where you're at in college football today, there's going to be some newness to your staff or to your team. And I think that part of it is a reality of college football today. I think the exciting part of it is if you love coaching, you love being around the players. Player development is what your absolute joy of what you get to do. And I think all of us couldn't wait to get back and be off the road and be around this football team. And I think the next big piece of this is what we're going to be honest with you, the fall will challenge, were we able to align and unify this football team as one team? One team, and what does that look like? How do we understand that our mission, our goal is bigger than us? We sit in the proudest football tradition in all of college football. Do we understand that it's about those that came before us? Do we understand what we play for is bigger than us? Do we understand all the other things that come with football, situational football, getting in the best shape of your life, playing for each other, all things that are critically important. And to me, that's what's awesome about this time of year, is you really get to sink into the foundational building blocks of team and what success looks like in the fall. And it's these dark days that nobody ever gets to see that are the critical moments and the critical time to begin to build football teams. So I can't wait. I think our staff feels the same way, of just really getting back around our football team and beginning to build team. Everybody uses the buzzword culture. Culture is not words, it's how you live, it's how you act, it's how you carry yourself, and we get to begin to build those foundational blocks within our program, and we're excited about that.
Rear on the left, Todd.
Hi, Matt. How you doing? Todd Sadowski with Nittany Game Week. You just mentioned the pride and the tradition and with the program. How do you harness those relationships? I'm curious as to the feedback you've gotten and how many people have reached out, the former Letterman and the people that have played and ones that you maybe knew or didn't know. What's been that message so far, and how do you utilize those resources?
I still would tell you, I think those resources are the superpower of Penn State football. Our greatest gift is those that came before us. It's still one of the absolute joys that you have walking in that facility every day, and you see the names that have played and coached and the tradition that has come before us. And I'll be honest with you, I've really tried to work really hard and will continue to work really hard at unifying and aligning our history, our former players back involved in our football program, because I just think it's so critical. It's what makes Penn State football really special. It's what has made the greatest time and the greatest eras and the greatest moments in this history of Penn State football. It makes it an honor to represent every day. And I know that, and to continue to build that into our football team, we're going to need everybody, and certainly our past coaches, our past players that want to come be a part of this, and we're excited about that.
Over here on the right, John.
John Sauber, Southern Daily Times. Matt, you mentioned the coaching staff earlier and building that all up. On the offensive side, you brought a lot of those guys with you from Iowa State. What made you think that Taylor is ready to be the offensive coordinator, and that those guys are ready for that kind of jump up to Penn State from Iowa State?
Yeah, I would just say this. I think when you watch the success that we've been able to have offensively over the last 2 years, especially with, the type of teams we had at Iowa State. I think no matter who we played, where we played, what it played, I think we really gave ourselves great opportunity to have great success offensively. And, I think Taylor has proven over his 2-year period to be one of the up-and-coming bright minds in all of college football. I think he's got a fearlessness as a play caller, and yet, the reality of football today, and sometimes I think we can get lost in offense and defense production, it's team. And you have to have offense and defensive coordinators and special teams coordinators that understand how we win is winning team football, complementary football. And I think that's one of the great things that it's been awesome to be a part of his growth journey, even the last 2 years, to watch how he's handled games. And man, there's going to be a time where we're going to have to win a game 9-7, and we're going to have to play to the defense. And there's going to have to be times where you got to go win, and you got to win 43-42. And we played Miami 2 years ago in the bowl game and had to win 43-42. And you got to make the critical calls in the moment. And you've watched him really kind of mature in terms of who he's become as a play caller, great leader of people. Again, when you put the coordinator title to any of these coaches, I think you're expecting a gentleman and somebody that's got unbelievable leadership ability and the ability to align and unify a group, and Taylor's done a great job of that.
Allie Berube, ABC 27, Nittany Nation. We've seen you all over campus since you got here, despite all the effort of putting together a roster and a coaching staff. You were just at the hockey game where they had 75,000 people here inside Beaver Stadium. What have you learned about the power of Penn State? How much support goes behind some of these efforts? And as you've brought a lot of people who don't have Pennsylvania connections, what has their response been like to seeing this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I said to Pat Saturday night after the wrestling match on Friday night and Saturday's hockey that it's really two of the greatest collegiate sporting events that I've ever been a part of. And I'll start with the wrestling. I mean, to watch Cale and his team, to watch this fan base, just to watch the excellence that it stands for, and to see the fan base be so educated on what's going on, even within the match, was so powerful to watch. And it was really one of those moments that you're just like, wow, how special is this place? The fans, the people, the leadership, the excellence of Cale, the excellence of the young men that are competing, how they competed, how they carried themselves. It was awesome. And then on the flip side, obviously, for the first time to be, in Beaver Stadium, to be able to watch that place fill up, and it kind of gave you chills just walking out on that field and seeing how special of an environment that is, to watch that team compete and play the way they played last weekend. And I would say the same thing. I think the excellence of the competition, what they stood for, how they competed to the very end. I think all those things were great for our players, our staff, everybody to watch and witness. And I think those moments, the more we can do that as a team, the more we can do that as a staff. Again, it all goes back to, we only get 12 guaranteed Saturdays in college football. And you have to use all your resources to understand what it means to be your best. We deal with 18 to 22-year-olds that they're going through a lot, and it's not always easy. But when you understand it's bigger than you, and you understand what you're playing for is bigger than you, then it gives you a chance to be your best. And I think our staff and our players are learning that every opportunity we get out to be engaged in this great community.
Over on the right, Daniel.
Matt, Daniel Gown, Lines 24/7. With bringing Rocco back over from Iowa State, how important was it for you to bring that quarterback over, and how does that, I guess, affect how you build your team, given you have an established veteran, in that position?
Well, I think the one thing about Rocco is I've always felt this about the quarterback position. I feel that the quarterback and the head football coach have to be tied at the hip. And I feel like they have to be tied at the hip because their leadership is so critical to the entirety of the football program. And I think that's even more today than ever in college athletics, and I think we see that in the National Football League. We're watching two teams getting ready to play on Sunday that their quarterbacks have played great, and they've kind of exemplified the attitude, the effort, the demeanor, and the mannerisms of the head football coaches, and it's why they're having success, because they're tied at the hip. And Rocco has always been that for us. Tough, gritty character. I don't think any quarterback in college football coming back has won more games with the last possession of the game than what Rocco Beck has during his time as a starter. And I think for him, what I believe Penn State football is: integrity, character, class, excellence, grit. He embodies every one of those traits. And so to me, I just felt like that was such a critical opportunity for him to finish his career with us, and with us and the start of Penn State football, to get somebody that I truly believe embodies what the excellence of this football program has stood for, both on and off the field. And I think those things are critically important. Rocco's a 3.6 student in his business school. He's graduated. Man, his education is really important to him. He's one of the greatest leaders I've ever been around. He played last year. This poor guy had he played with a torn labrum on his non-throwing shoulder. He had to get shot up every Tuesday and Wednesday just to practice the last 4 weeks in his throwing shoulder and play. And the guy gave us every chance to win every one of those games, every step of the way. And so he's as tough and as competitive as any football player I've been around. So I think he brings those traits with him. And again, really proud of what he's about, and really excited for him to continue to lead and grow within our football program for sure.
Front left, Greg.
Coach Greg Pickle from Blue White Illustrated, thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Can you take us through your defensive coordinator search? If there was I don't know if reset's the right word, but obviously Coach Heacock retired. Did you expect to bring him here? And then what made you settle on Coach Lynn being the right option to morph what is a staff that includes guys from Iowa State, but also from here and elsewhere?
Yeah, great question. So, that it was interesting. Obviously this whole process with the Penn State opportunity for myself happened really fast. And, we had actually gotten to the point at Iowa State where Coach Haycock and I, before we went into the season, kind of were in a year-to-year basis of just talking about where are we at, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep going? And he had kind of said before the start of our season this past year that he thought, this might be it for him. And uniquely, we got to the Monday after our last football game at Oklahoma State and had a long conversation and, just said, hey, Coach, where do you think we're going to go? Where do you feel like we want to go with things? And on Tuesday morning, we talked and had breakfast, and he said, man, Matt, I think I'm going to retire. So you fast forward, and everything kind of gets crazy for the next 3 to 4 days. And he kept teasing our team that he might have another COVID year of eligibility, and so when all this went down, we got here on Monday, and after the press conference, I think it was Monday night, I called him. I said, hey, you want to use any of that eligibility, and he thought about it for a couple of days and called back Thursday evening, I think, and just said, hey, I don't think I can give you what you need, and I feel like retirement, being with my family, I'm ready to do that. And so we certainly understood it. Now I'm going to try like heck to keep getting him around here and having some of his wisdom. And really from that point on, you kind of went and said, okay, what's best for Penn State football? Where are we going? What are the right names? What are the right people? And honestly, the first name that came up was Coach Lynn. And obviously from talking to some people that I have great respect for, to even in-house of some of our own coaches that had come with me, just felt like that was the number one target for the style of defense we wanted to play, for somebody that understood Penn State football, that wanted to be here, that wanted to be a part of this program, that had a passion for Penn State. I felt like that was critical. And obviously, it took a while to get to, where we got to, but, Coach Lynn, for him to kind of have to, financially give up some things to get here, to kind of come here with purpose and integrity, I don't know if I could be any more excited to be able to lead with him. Him and Coach Broomfield were together at the Houston Texans. We had hired Coach Broomfield, our safeties coach from the Houston Texans, to come back to Iowa State, which is where he was an alumnus of. And those guys had an incredible relationship, so that made me feel really good about it. I know Terry and Danton had a relationship prior to, so it made me feel really good about it. And then, I think from that point on, it was just a process of trying to get to, is this right for you, for your family? Is this the right time? And, schematically, I think we see the game very similarly. But I think most importantly, you talk about leadership, excellence. What do you stand for? Do you believe in the development 18 to 22-year-olds. How do you see us winning the game? Can we be a great team together? And I think all those things were no-brainers for us.
Over on the right, Audrey.
Hey, Matt. Audrey Snyder, Inside the Lions. When you kind of look back on the transfer portal process, it was rapid fire for a lot of us, too, trying to figure out what you guys were targeting and what you needed. What is your role, your involvement with the portal in terms of working hand-in-hand with Derek, and what are kind of your general thoughts on the 39, I think it is, transfers you guys were able to bring in?
Yeah, and it's probably one of my favorite things still, Audrey, because it's my responsibility, is who comes into the program and building the program both holistically for right now and then obviously where we're going. And it was exhausting. There was probably a lot of sleepless nights, and there was a lot of it was going fast and furious, but I think the biggest thing that we tried to do a great job of, and maybe where we had a little bit of advantage, is trying to figure out first and foremost, before we worried about the portal, was what is happening with our own football team. And that was a challenge. You're talking about, that team, our team had been kind of like picked at for the last 3 months. You can certainly tell that there, as you guys are finding out, there are really no rules in recruiting. So it certainly looks like they've been recruited for the last 3 months. And yet the reality of some of those guys deciding to say, you know what, Coach, we love Penn State. We want to stay here, and we want to lead forward with you. And that was really huge. And I give Terry a lot of credit to obviously the success to have some momentum leaving the football season was really positive. And some of those guys, you saw how they played in the bowl game, and a lot of those guys are the guys that just demanded and decided that they wanted to come back and lead forward. And so I think knowing who was coming back was critically important because it allowed us then to say, okay, how do we go build a team? Let's not just acquire people. Let's build a football team and build a team where we just got done talking before we came over here, where I think you see it looks like a team. It's not senior laden heavy. It's got good layers. It's got, we're young in still some areas. We're able to get some guys with some years that culturally fit us. And I think the biggest thing that I told you guys at the beginning, we cannot be willing to just take talent without character. We have to lay a foundation to who Penn State football wants to be and where we want to go going forward, and making sure we dotted every I and crossed every T. So I think, again, where I thought we did a really great job is making sure that, not only were we finding the right guys, but making sure once we built the team, it was the right human beings that fit us. I think structurally, we're definitely going to have that because, again, that's where the head coach, an X receiver has got to have these values. A Z receiver's got to have these values. A left guard's got to have these values. An interior D tackle has to have these values. And I think that's the nice thing, and I think that's what has helped us really whether we were at Toledo or Iowa State or here, is clearly defining what you're looking for, not only as a human being, but also positionally, and then to recruit to those value systems. And I think that helped us a lot too.
In the front, Bob.
Hey, Matt. Bob Flounders with Penn Live. You just talked about Dan, a former Penn State player, and why he's here. We kind of learned what you felt about Terry at your introductory press conference, Terry Smith. I wanted to ask you about a couple other Penn State guys that are on your staff, Dan Connor, Trace McSorley. Why was it important to you to make sure they were part of your first staff?
Great question. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed after our press conference the last time I saw everybody was really Monday night and all day Tuesday and really into Wednesday morning, was to interview and to talk to every single coach in our program. Because again, I think you have a vision of how you want to build your staff, but until you get to talk about who is currently sitting within the staff, who can help us navigate a pathway forward. I met with Dan Connor, and it took 2 seconds to say, this human gets it. He is Penn State football. What he stands for, what he talks about excellence looking like. What's gone well? What are some of the areas that need to move forward? I think Dan was so articulate in where this program is. Why he loves Penn State football, what it did for him, and honestly, how he envisions this program moving forward. And it was such a great match. I think Trace, the same thing. I think Trace is just starting, how special his career's got the ability to be. And you talk about wanting the winningest quarterbacks, and in my mind, I kept thinking about him and Rocco have very similar traits of like the human being and what they're about and the impact that he could have in a positive way on Rocco. And, there's been times I've gone to Trace like, man, what have you seen? Like, give me some insight on your thoughts on what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, how do we move ourselves forward? And so I think those have been huge wins for us. Alan Semitis has done the same thing in terms of, the recruiting office and, his experiences both as a player here. We were just talking about Coach Paterno's camps back in the day and, what that looked like and, evaluating the East Coast recruiting and some of the things that he talked about to, just the impact that he's already had on, recruiting and what it means to play here. And, so we're really fortunate. The gentlemen that decided to stay, they've been huge inputs, and we're really grateful that those guys have stayed put, because to me, I think there's a great identification on how do you build program, what do you believe in. Those guys embody it. And for me to be able to have that wisdom, to have that experience, to have living proof of what the power of Penn State excellence looks like on our staff, it's been really fortunate to have for me.
Neil Rudell, Altoona Mirror. Just wondering if you could discuss your philosophy about spring practice. Do you believe in a competitive spring game? And also, has your family joined you here?
Yes. Let's go 2, and then I'll go to 1. So one's probably one can get me in trouble. The two won't. My family is here, and so we're finally settled in. Last Thursday night, I came off the road recruiting, and we were actually in a house, so it felt like I was a normal human being for the first time in 2 months. So, and to have them here has been awesome, and they're off to a great start, which I'm really grateful. Again, this community has wrapped their arms around us, and I appreciate that. And spring practice. I am a huge believer. Anytime you have 15 practices, the unbelievable value of what spring practice has to look like, especially as you build a team, I think critically important. And I think what I've always believed in that 15th practice is, what does that look like? I do think it's critically important for us to, Pat and I are deciding of how we'll do the blue and white game and what that'll look like. We will certainly do something, and that information will get out here hopefully early next week in terms of what that will look like. But I think it's really important for our kids to be in that stadium with our fans. I don't want the first time the Rocco Beck to throw a pass is his first game in there with fans. I think it's really important for this team to be able to get out there. And again, we've got a lot of guys coming off of injury, and so what does that look like? How do we go practice? But I think for our fan base to see us on that field and for us to be able to be out in that stadium with our fans, I think before we play a game is absolutely critically important. And so we will certainly do something. What that'll look like probably will base a lot on our health of where we're at that point, and then making sure we do a great job of getting out there and getting great work in. No matter what it is, we got to make sure we get value out of that 15th practice. Yep.
Over on the right, Tyler.
Hey, Matt, good to see you again. Tyler Donahue from Lions 24/7. We're so accustomed to seeing Nick Singleton and Katron Allen lead the way at running back. They've moved on. Can you tell us what stood out to you about Carson Hansen, a guy you're obviously very familiar with, and then James Peoples coming over as well? Yeah. Those two, and if I could tack on little Savon Huggins, what stood out to him as a position coach to you, and what do you like? What do you think he can do for this room?
Well, the first thing I asked Savon is, does he have any eligibility? Like, can we use you a little bit? You know what I mean? I know we lost these two big, good-looking guys that just, had great careers here at Penn State. But we're excited about Coach Huggins coming on board. I think the first thing that I would say about him is just from a gentleman that, number one, regionally has such a great understanding of this region. Number two, went through the recruiting process in a really high way, right? The number one recruit in the country, went through recruiting and had his ups and downs. And I think that's what I love about Savon. It's like, why do you coach? And it's like, man, what I learned through my collegiate journey. And I think you can tell the respect that he had at Boston College to be able to be retained over 3 different staffs, I think says a lot about his character, who he is, what he's about. And it shined through in the interview process. So we felt like we hit a grand slam in terms of getting Savon to come on board and his family. They fit us culturally, and I certainly believe they fit, the Penn State way of doing things. I'd say the next thing about that room. Carson Hansen, Carson's one of those guys that played as a true freshman for us at Iowa State and came in and we asked him to do a lot as a true freshman, was a third down back, and his role kind of exploded, as the season went on. And then I think you saw him really start to take off his sophomore and junior year. I mean, he became the absolute workhorse, became the one, and just was a guy from a physical standpoint is one of the most trusted players in our football program. Probably had we played a bowl game, would have rushed for 1,000 yards, well over 1,000 yards this past year. And he's durable, he's tough, he's physical, he's got great vision. He's got the ability that if you needed him to carry the ball 40 times in a game, you can do it. He's a guy that's a single-wing high school football team where the guy was doing it in his whole high school career. And so I think what you'll get from Carson is a guy that's about as trusted as you're going to find, is a great downhill runner. We were really excited when the James Peoples situation came into play. James we knew of. And as their season ended and his name was going into the transfer portal, there was a lot of excitement from our end because we thought, man, could we get a great compliment to Carson, a guy that, as well as a great downhill runner, who's physical and man, he's really impressive build, but also has got that kind of ability to hit a home run anytime he touches the ball. He's got great receiving ability. He's got the ability to be an elite catcher out of the backfield. He is physical enough to block on third down, and he's also a guy that, man, he can run inside and outside and has the ability to do really special things. So I think what you feel like is you got a great 1-2 punch, and then where does Quentin come? Where does he go? One of the things I've challenged him is physically taking his body from 195 to he should be a 220-pound tailback. He should be a big physical tailback, and I'm really proud of him. I think we weighed in today. He was 209 already, and so I think he's a guy that's been totally bought in. Again, we all mature differently, and you come off a great bowl game and the success he had in the bowl game, and I think you see a guy that's like determined to do special things. So I'm excited about the competition. Obviously, we get Cam Wallace coming back. I think Cam finally getting healthy and totally being back into play. I'm excited about what he brings to the table. You talk about a first-class human being. And then obviously with Sheffy coming on board, and honestly just what he's done for a young pup to be in here in 3 weeks, and physically how you watch his body keep coming forward. We thought that was a big win for us, just what he's about, his pride of being here and of being part of this program. So I like that room. We're excited about it. I think there's a lot of competition. I think it'll all sort itself out as we kind of work through spring ball and fall camp. But, to have those guys, those top 3 guys who've proven it, Cam, a really talented guy that I think injuries have kind of delayed maybe some of the maturity that he's wanted so far in the program, and then a really talented young freshman. We're excited about where that room's got the ability to grow forward into. Mm-hmm.
Back right corner, T. Frank. Hey, Thomas Frank Carr, Blue White Illustrated. Everybody calls me T. Frank.
Yeah. You're not gonna expect me to remember that.
No, not at all.
All right,
This is-
good.
this is
Just
the-
don't
this-
quiz me on it afterwards. I'll
No.
work hard to remember.
This is a common occurrence with me.
Okay.
Don't worry. You mentioned Danton Lynn a little bit earlier, and I wanted to ask you a follow-up on that. You mentioned the identity you want to play with. His defense has been pretty varied over the last 3 years as to what its identity is. So I'm just curious from your perspective, what do you view as your identity, and is that versatility a part of what you're looking for from your defensive coordinator?
I believe in multiplicity. We have, I think sometimes we can get lost into what are we, right? And what great teams are, what great offense and defenses do is they highlight the players and the playmakers on each side of the ball. That's what they do. And I think the thing that I love about Dan Lynn is his variability, his ability to have consistency, and I think you see a confidence that his defense plays with, and you saw that at UCLA, you saw that at USC, and the improvement that they were making during his time there. But you also saw the ability to structurally dictate and navigate the pace of the game at times, because he could vary the fronts, he could vary how the run fits were looking. And I feel like you have to, man, in college football, there's injuries every week. Man, who's the best player? What are you defending on defense? Man, some teams are 10, 11 personnel, and you're going to defend it one way. Some teams are 12 and 13 personnel. You got to defend it another way. And, you know, you're talking to a guy that had to evolve defensively from, you know, tried to go be a 4-2-5 guy with not guys that are good enough to do that in the Big 12. And you found out real quick you better change. And you reinvented ourselves defensively, and we found a way to play defense in the Big 12. Well, if you've watched us, we had to reinvent ourselves the last 2 years because the Big 12 all of a sudden became a 12 and 13 personnel league where you had tailbacks, and all of a sudden everybody was playing like we were with tight ends and kind of wanted to smash you. And, man, we had to figure out that middle safety looked good when you were playing all these spread teams, but when they're running for 4 to 5 yards a pop, man, how do you get that middle safety out of there and get them back down into the fit? You just had to grow and adapt. And so I think a lot of it for me was awesome to be able to go through the evolution that we have. Football's cyclical. It always is going to be. The more you have the ability to defend everything and then have the players that give you the ability to defend everything, I think that's really important. But you also have to have the guy at the top that can be able to put those guys in the place to have that kind of success. So that's my biggest thing. You know, you guys will hear me say it probably, you know, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of heck for it as we grow forward. But players, formations, plays. Who are the players? What formations are we going to get in? It doesn't matter if it's offense, defense, or special teams, and what plays get called. You know, when you don't play by that model, I think it's really tough to have success. When you do, highlight the players, put them in best position to be successful. Man, let the players go win the games on Saturdays. Those are how you have to play football, and it doesn't matter what phase.
We got time for 2 more. Mark.
Hey, man. Mark Wogenrich, Penn State on SI. You just did the breakdown for the running backs room. Now could you just do the rest of the roster? Position, not really.
I could. Where do you want me to start? Yeah.
You just said it players, formations, plays. Who are the players on this team? If you just from like the wide view, where did this roster get better in the last 2 months? Who did you bring in? Leaders, that sort of thing. Who are these guys?
Yeah. And honestly, I think a lot of that, Mark, I think it's unfair until the one thing we're all, at least in our football building, all of us are going through, there's a common thread, and it's change. And right, like until you go through change and really know who we are and what we are, you may have been one thing at Ohio State or one thing at Iowa State or even one thing here, but we're all going through the same common denominator, and that common denominator we're going through is change. And how you handle change and how you grow through change, I think will really dictate who those players are. Do I feel really good about our roster? Boy, I do. I think we have a really competitive roster. You know, I feel like we gave health to the quarterback room here, you know, from top to bottom. I feel like, you know, we were able to do the same thing with losing some great players at running back. I think at tight end, you bring in a Mackey Award finalist, and you pair it with Rapp, who's one of the best tight ends in the country. And then another NFL tight end in Gabe Burkle, who, man, tears his ACL in the TCU game. Now you'd say he's one of the top 10 tight ends in all of college football. You know, Cooper Alexander was one of the highest recruited tight ends in the country coming out of high school. And, you know, we feel like, you know, that's a room that's got great flexibility and ability. You know, a wide receiver, I think, again, you look at the production of Soul and Eskelson and what that group has stood for, and then the talent of Kobe Howard and Zay Robinson and Karan Brookins, and it's like, man, you feel like there's competition there. How does that competition evolve? Who comes out of it? What is their top-end ability? You know, I think that's an area we feel really confident in because it doesn't, for the last 10 years, that receiver room at Iowa State, that's been our staple, you know, and I know we're coming to a place where we kind of got to reshape that a little bit and bring that back to life. You know, I think Terry's excellence in terms of keeping that corner room together. I think you guys know how special that corner room's got the ability to be. I mean, those guys are young. Those guys are talented. Jameer Joseph, you can go down the line of what Zion Tracy, AC Collins, what those guys got the ability to be. But in the competition that's coming out of that room is going to be nothing short of excellent. You know, we totally reshaped the D-line. You know, I think our vision bigger and physical. Like, this is the Big Ten. Like, you got to stop the run. Like, we got to be big and physical in there. I feel like, especially on the interior portion of the defensive line, I think we totally reshaped things, and Coach Malloy was a huge help of that, obviously, coming over from UCLA and Danton, those guys together, putting that together. But to have Dallas come on board and what he did at Utah, Ciale, what he did, man, and what he brings in terms of the physical presence of that room and depth. I think there's 3 or 4 deep that we feel like there's going to be great competition. How does that room grow itself forward? Does Ty Blanding take another step forward? Man, that's going to be great to watch. I think defensive end, it started by keeping that young talent home. I think getting Yvonne to stay home was huge. For that kid to start in the Big Ten and play the way he did last year was nothing short of exceptional. And I think he's an anchor. Max Granville, where does he continue to go? Be able to add the pieces we were able to add around that to create competition. Again, 3 deep was kind of our mindset. We better be able to create it in this league to be able to play our schedule and be able to be our best every Saturday. And how does that room grow and develop? And you saw that, man, we hired 2 big-time defensive line coaches. Coach Malloy to really be centered around the interior piece of it. Man, Christian Smith was the D-line coach at Northwestern, and I think everybody that watched that D-line play the last 3 years and saw how that group growed, you'd say is as good as anybody out there. And to have 2 guys, one to coach the edges and one coach the interior, we got to be good up front, and we got to do great things there. I'd say the O-line, I know I didn't talk about that. I think we feel as good about that room as any room. Man, to be able to keep those guys, to get Donka to come back and what he's about, that guy, you want to talk about who's the leader, he's the leader. 3.8 student, one of the best players here, and has got a chance to be one of the absolute best players in our football program. Cooper Cousins, what that guy's about, what he's got the ability to become. He's nothing short of elite. Man, I think there's going to be great competition at center. You got Dom Rulli coming back. He's meant a lot. A senior here, loves this place, what it stands for. Trevor Burr, we thought was one of the best interior O-linemen in the entire country coming back next year, and has started for 2 years and has played as good a football as anybody. I just think you look at Malachi Goodman. There's another unbelievably talented football player. I think's got high-end potential, but I think there's almost 2.5 deep on that O-line, and I don't know who the starters are going to be, but they're going to have to go earn it, and we're going to have to see who can consistently be the guys, but I think there's great talent in that room. Man, linebacker, Tony Rojas, we're really fortunate for Tony to come back and want to lead our football program, coming off of surgery, getting himself ready to rock and roll. I think Tash has got a chance to be one of the great linebackers of all time here. I love his video. I love what he's about. I'd go to fight with that guy right now today. I'd like Dan Connor and him to lead the team out, at times. And so, you take that group and, you bring in then some of those Iowa State guys. The years those guys had, I think they played as good as any linebackers in the country last year. If you look at the second half of the season with, how those guys played with Ebel and Bacon, those guys are really talented, high-end football players that are going into their senior year. And then at safety, I think the same thing. Marcus Neal, I don't know if there was a better defensive player in the Big 12 last year. I think what he brings to the table, his physicality, his toughness, his ability to play sideline to sideline. Jamison Patton, what those guys bring to the table is experience and toughness, and I think a great sense of character. And, how does that safety room kind of shape out, behind those guys? It's going to be really fun to watch. And so I think to me, globally, and I'm not even talking about special teams, you got one of the best kickers in the country coming back. We did a great job of adding a great punter. I think Blaze has got a chance to be a great long snapper. I think there's competition and there's the ability to grow, but we got to go grow. And we got to, it's all, you guys know, every coach in America is going to tell you how great their team is forever. I'm saying the opposite. We got really great talent, but we got to grow forward. We're all going through change. We got to figure out who can do it the most consistently, who can be trusted on 3rd and 1, who can stop the run on 4th and 1, who can run the ball on 4th and 1 on the goal line. Man, who can do those things really good? That's what's going to be really fun about where we're about to get ourselves ready to go into. But yeah, you asked to go through it. There's a little bit of it. Yeah, and I'm sure I missed a couple along the way. Yeah.
Time for one more. Max, over here on the right.
I'm not sure how I'm supposed to follow that, but Max Ralph, Penn Live, thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
To stick on the defensive side, you mentioned Ikaika. You also have Tyson at linebackers. Those guys were Power 4 coordinators last year. How did you convince them to join the staff? And then you also supplemented both those spots with Dan Connor and Christian Smith. So how did you land on that dynamic? How important was that?
Yeah, you know, and I think those are, again, it's all about the people, right? I think sometimes we get so lost in our world on titles. It's about aligning the team and the people together. And to me, that's one of the things that I at least know I can look myself in the mirror, and we brought the right leader of young men into our football program. That, and it's hard to find in college football. It's hard to find because it starts with the coaches and it's equally with the players. Who wants to come together, go to work, and not care who gets the credit? Fool, buddy. If you can find that, you got a shot. But I think that was the starting point for me. And you're right, like, you know, Coach Veit did an unbelievable job at Cincinnati the last 2 years, rebuilding that defense and what they were able to do. And, you know, excited for him to come on board. Coach Veit's history with us at Iowa State, recruited a lot of those guys, was a great developer of the linebacker position. To have Dan want to stay on board and those two be a great 1-2 punch. And, you know, I think that's huge. And obviously, you know, Tyson's ability to, in the state of Ohio and his recruiting ability and what he's done there has been exceptional. And then I think you flip it over to that D-line. For Coach Malloy to want to come on board, I think you'll find out real fast. He's an energy giver, right? He is a guy that fills this room with unbelievable energy. He cares about people. He cares about kids, and his purpose is far greater than any title. And I really appreciated that. And you know, Christian is the same way. You know, Christian was one of my first captains as a head coach at 31, 32 years old at the University of Toledo. And I've watched this guy become one of the absolute great coaches right now in our profession on the D-line. And, you know, to have him coaching those edges and knowing how critical the development of that defensive end position is and that D-line position, I just think it would have been a mistake to just have one defensive line coach. I think, you know, they're just too different today. You know, the interior D-line and the exterior D-line. I think you need two really great coaches that can help those guys develop and be their best, both from a recruiting standpoint and from a developmental standpoint. I think it's absolutely critical, and we got really fortunate to get both those guys to decide to come here and be a part of this.
All right. Thank you very
Awesome.
much, Coach.
Thank you, guys.